Today, the Subcommittee on Oversight and Accountability will examine the Global Engagement Center, or GEC, and its successes, its failures, and questions about weaponization. GEC's mission statement reads, in part, that it seeks to counter foreign, state, and non-state propaganda and disinformation efforts aimed at undermining the stability of the United States, its allies, and partner nations. And we're here today to determine whether or not that mission is being fulfilled. And we look forward to you answering questions about that. On October 7th, Hamas terrorists stormed into Israel with a single goal: inflict as much pain and incite as much horror onto the civilian population as possible. Entire families were burned alive. An unborn baby was cut from its mother's womb. A Holocaust survivor in her wheelchair was dragged out of her home as a hostage. On October 7th, Israel was thrust into a war for its very existence, with rockets launched from Gaza Strip and Hezbollah fighters trading fire on the northern border. Israel is locked in battles on a number of fronts, but the Israeli people are facing another battle worldwide, and that is anti-Semitism and fake news from international institutions and major news outlets, including some in the United States of America. Look no further than the October 17th, when a rocket hit the Al-Ali Arab hospital in Gaza. Almost immediately, the Hamas-run Ministry of Health claimed that it was a gross act of war crimes by Israel that cost 500 civilians their lives. And rather than fact-checking the story, news outlets, including the New York Times and the Associated Press, were entirely willing to take the terrorists' talking points and amplify them to the hundreds of millions of people. Headlines blared that Israel strikes hundreds in hospital. That's what the Palestinians said. But here's the problem. Hamas was lying. And according to preliminary conclusions by our own Pentagon, the explosion was caused by a Palestinian Islamic Jihad rocket misfire. In fact, mounting evidence even shows that not only was there little to no structural damage done to the hospital, that it was in a parking lot that was hit by debris from the rocket. Outlets like the New York Times did eventually post retractions, but the reputational and political damage was done. Violent protests and riots broke out at our embassies across the region. More protests with liberal hotspots here at home erupted overnight. Hamas leadership called for a global day of rage. Even the president's peacekeeping efforts were halted as a result. Jordanian leadership refused to meet with him because of what was going on with global media and propaganda. Those on the left consistently claim that words can cause violence. Well, here's a very prime example of that prediction coming true. This single example of disinformation led to the condemnation of the United States of America and Israel, and the heightened likelihood of multinational conflict, very real consequences. In my opinion, this story is exactly the type of disinformation the State Department's anti-propaganda body should be focused on countering. But I have questions about whether it saw this coming. Even if we give it the benefit of the doubt and assume that GEC was involved behind the scenes, offering support to the Pentagon and other agencies, the State Department's anti-disinformation apparatus has failed to quickly and publicly counter blatant disinformation. In the many cases, this case highlights the problem that I have with GEC, Mr. Kimmage. We know very little about the day-to-day operations. According to an OIG report, GEC's leadership was, quote, able to say, unable to determine whether it was meeting its strategic goals and objective to counter state-sponsored disinformation. We will want answers on that. If GEC isn't countering real-time disinformation that is damaging one of our greatest allies, what is it focused on? A few examples that we can point to seem to form a problematic pattern. GEC has issued grants to organizations that labeled Alexander Hamilton's New York Post one of the riskiest outlets, and another that had a hand in content moderation practices that targeted conservatives online. It's backed, quote, independent fact-checking organizations that are actually supported by left-wing billionaires. In the next year, this committee will decide whether or not GEC should be reauthorized. At this moment, we will determine what the problems are, if there are solutions to fixing any of those problems, and whether this should be reauthorized. The first problem that I see is actually fulfilling your mission to counter disinformation from foreign sources. I don't believe that you've adequately, in your statement, quantified your success in doing so. Second problem that I want addressed: areas where you should be involved and may be perceived not to be involved in this time, as I gave the example of Hamas and Israel. Third place that I have concern: there seem to be some operating in your office that are not as interested in fulfilling the mission statement, but are interested in weaponizing taxpayer resources in order to undercut media outlets and individuals who have a particular point of view. Mr. Kimmage, we've spoken, and I've read your opening statement, and I appreciate you taking the time to speak with me. I don't feel that the answers to all of those questions were in the opening statement that you wrote, your letter to us. I need you to convince us that GEC should be reauthorized. I need to hear about how GEC tangibly measures success, how it oversees its partners to ensure that it isn't perpetuating disinformation in other places, and what it does to prevent disastrous foreign propaganda on a daily basis. The onus is on you to change my mind. So I would encourage you to take a moment, think about your opening remarks, as my colleague will be giving his opening remarks, and don't just read us what you wrote to us, but please give us answers to the questions that we have for you so that we can have a very real and true understanding of the work that's being done, whether it's to counter our adversaries like China, Russia, Iran, Hamas, or any other. Hey everyone, thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed the video, please click like and subscribe. I will be back on YouTube with more exclusive content, so stay tuned.